This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
All right. Now that we've got the 5 cursed idol of the Squamous Lord, Sir Percy opens the door and steps outside, sword drawn.
Rock is right behind him. Knives ready.
All right. So after so long in the dark, damp dungeon, the light of the sun upon you is a welcoming sight. You can feel its warmth on your skin. You can hear the sounds of the nearby town as people are kind of going about their daily rituals.
Man, I was expecting some kind of ambush.
Yes. Mock thinks we should get this thing a couple of light as quickly as possible.
And as you turn towards town, a cloud of green smoke begins to coalesce.
Not again.
Come on. Wait for it. The cloud of green smoke coalesces, finally dispersing to reveal a tall, haughty man wearing an all too familiar green and orange robe.
Son of a bitch. Venomissimo. Again? I hate this guy.
The man smiles as his reptilian minions begin to emerge from behind the rocks and the trees and everything like around the entrance to the cave. And he looks at you and strokes his beard and says, "Thank you for getting the 5 cursed idol of the Squamous Lord. Once it's in my grasp, my plans will be nearly complete."
Again. This is the 3rd time he's done this to us. This is getting ridiculous.
I thought we were trying to keep this out of the hands of Ogar the Red. He's the one trying to revive the Squamous Lord. Venomissimo is just annoying.
What? Annoying? I thought he would come across as like a cool arch enemy.
And with that, welcome to the 403rd episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight, Phil, Jerry, and I discuss villains and their role in an adventure or a campaign. But first...
I am Phil.
I am Jerry.
And I am Old Man Logan.
Alrighty. To get us started for tonight, before we enter into the house misdirected, let's do a quick wellness check. Just really quick, physically and mentally. How are each of you doing, Bob? Starting with you.
Not bad. I am I'm still a little sore from my massage on Friday. Because the massage therapist had to go deep tissue and really get in on the neck. There was some knotted muscles and stuff. So I'm a little sore, but other than that, pretty solid. Jerry?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a good weekend. I got to relax a little bit, and I'm feeling healthy, and mentally I'm in a pretty good place. The week started out a little bit crazy because I'm down with staff members, but they're coming back. Yes, wacky. Thank you. Wacky, but things are coming back now, so it's good.
Good.
Bill?
I myself, physically feeling fine. My back's like a little sore. Like I could do with some stretching, but honestly, at the beginning of the pandemic, when I started stretching, is when I pulled my back. So like now I'm like a little gun shy. Like I'm thinking to myself, like I really should stretch, but then I'm like, but that is also how you jacked up your back. So I got to kind of ease into it. I have it on my to-do list and I keep looking at it going, I don't know. Other than that, mentally, I'm kind of okay. We had to have somebody come in and do some work on our house alarm today.
Okay.
It went bonkers Sunday night at dinner. Like it just went off and wouldn't stop going off. Like it wouldn't respond to the keypad or something. So we just like pulled the power on it. So they were like, yeah, we're going to have somebody come out and take a look at it. And I'm like, I don't really want, like, we haven't had anyone inside the bubble since March. But we took as many precautions as we could and cleaned everywhere that he was, like, after he had been through the house. But he had, like, kid gloves and PPE gear and all that stuff. And he was primarily in the basement, although I say that sitting feet from where he was working.
Yeah.
But I came down here, I could smell the Lysol and stuff. So I know that like everything's been cleaned up and stuff. So anyway, I was a little uncool with the breaking of the bubble. And I'm still a little anxious over there has not been a formal announcement yet for schools.
Yeah.
So I'm anxiously waiting to find out what plans await my kids. For all we know, the governor could just be looking at what's going on around the rest of the country and just be like, no in classroom.
Yeah. Considering the train wrecks of the places that have already opened classes. Yeah.
I don't put it past this governor, right? Like, I mean, this kind of broad sweeping thing is not out of character for him. Yeah. Also, we have really good numbers right now. I don't know how much you want to risk our really good numbers on opening up school. I got a lot of issues, but we're not going to talk about that here. But anyway, overall, just a little bit anxious. Word is that he's going to make some announcement at the end of the week. So find out then kind of like what's going on. But otherwise, other than that, doing fine and staying safe, right? Just being smart and staying safe. Cool. Roll over to one thing. What is one good thing going on in your world this week, Jerry?
Well, I got to watch Jojo Rabbit.
Glenn highly recommended that movie.
It is a strange, funny, dark at times movie with some really good characters and actors playing some really good roles and some absolutely. It's got parts of it that are slightly surreal, like when he's talking to Adolf Hitler as his best friend.
Oh boy!
But it's done in a way that makes Adolf Hitler into a complete buffoon. I mean, Taika Waititi did a great job of making it exactly what it should have been. I'm just going to say, if you like dark comedies with some interesting history, if you want to see some, I mean, the basic plot is a boy who thinks he wants to join the Hitler Youth finds out his mom is hiding a Jewish girl in his house, and it challenges everything he thinks he knows about the war.
Oh, okay.
And it's a dark comedy, and his imaginary friend is Adolf Hitler. So...
But again, I've heard nothing but good things about it. So
yeah, I've heard a lot of people praising it as well.
Yes.
The thing that turned me off for it is there seems to be a level of absurdity, a weirdness to the movie that I have. My threshold for absurdity is like super low.
It's fair.
When you get to a certain point, it's just like,
It's not absurd in the way it's like a who's the guy that did Moonlight Kingdom and the Grand Budapest Hotel and all those kind of movies?
No clue.
The what the hell's the name? The Royal Tenenbaums. It's not quite as absurd as those, but it's got that kind of a feel. Paul Thomas Anderson.
I'm not 100% sure, but I know the movies you're talking about.
I always get Paul Thomas Anderson and Paul W.S. Anderson confused. And one directs very intelligent, surreal, slightly surreal comedies, and the other one is married to Mila Jovovich and made the Three Musketeers steampunk movie. So
there's a little bit of a difference between.
Yes, there is. But anyway, if you like this, there is some the surrealness only occurs in like three times. It's not like he's always talking to Hitler.
Yeah,
it's a couple times. And it's like a little boy talking to his imaginary friend, trying to talk his way through things.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you like dark comedies, if you like movies that make you think about things a little hard, and you like movies about people who see how bad it was, how bad the Nazis were, and how bad the Nazis are, and how they come to realize that and change their life, you might like the movie.
There you go.
How about you, Phil?
Yeah, for me, most of this week was all about Numenera. And I may talk about this a little bit more in the conversation quarter, but we did our session 0 for Numenera this week on Sunday. This is the game that's replacing my Icons game. So this is Glenn, Tony, Bob, and I. And I spent all week reading Numenera stuff, and over the weekend I was listening to past episodes of Cypher Speak, because if you're going to learn some, Numenera stuff, why wouldn't I go right to the experts? So Darcy and Troy. Yeah. So I was cleaning the house, listening to old episodes of Cypher Speak, which is fantastic. And then I've been reading the book all weekend, and we played. It's a very Numenera week, and I really dig Numenera. Like
Good.
I was one of the original Kickstarter backers back in 12 when it first came out, because I was a huge Monty Cook fanboy back then. And at that point, Monty Cook could do no wrong. But we really, like, we've over the years only played it a little. Like Chris ran it as the game before we played Dungeon World. And then we did the EP like a year and a half ago on the show. And and I've never not enjoyed it, but I've never run it myself. And we've never really dug in and played. So just reading about the world and starting to think of how I want to structure my campaign. I mean, it's ours. I mean,
Yeah.
But I'm GMing this thing, and it's a little more traditional than normal from what we play. So I'm digging it. So yeah, I had a very Numenera weekend and enjoyed it greatly. Babbo.
Yeah, so
what'd you do?
I pulled the trigger on a gaming table on Kickstarter. They had a Kickstarter for a actually reasonable priced gaming table, and I was eyeballing it, and I finally decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. I've had some money put aside in my savings for a while now, for things like this, and I was like, not 100% sure what I'm going to do with it when it shows up at my house, because I don't have any place to put it yet. But I figure when I get it, I'll clear some space. I'll put it together, because it needs to be assembled, and I'll put it together, make sure everything's kosher and nothing's wrong with it or whatever, and then I can just take it apart again and put it off to the side until I got a space for it. But
that's right.
But I said, to hell with it. I'm going to get it. And it's interesting because the one of the things that was holding me back from backing this particular Kickstarter was that it was on the smaller side. It was only 4 feet on the long side. So it was like a 3x4.
Yep.
And so putting 6 people around it, if you decided to go that way, would get, a little bit tight, depending on what you're doing and what kind of game you were playing. And then they said, you know what, we're going to make a slightly bigger one for the people that have been asking about it. So they added on like 3 days before the thing ended. They said, okay, we'll do one that's 3x5. And the new one, not only did they give us 3x5, but they said they're going to make the what they're calling the vault, which is the lowered, the tabletop itself, which is recessed below the edge for gaming, and then they have a dining topper that you can put on it. It's an add-on, but it's not that bad. But the vault is actually adjustable in height, so you can go from 1 inch deep to 4 inches deep, and you can change it. And I thought, okay, well, now they've got a bigger table and they've got a little extra added incentive there, a little bit more money. But overall, I compared it with the Jasper table, and the biggest thing was the shipping. They are subsidizing the shipping on this Kickstarter, so it's reasonable. It's shipping in the U.S., but it's the grand total for a comparable table from Jasper would have been $1,000, not counting shipping. And this came into like $826, including the shipping. So these guys aren't
really
known. This is their first Kickstarter, and it's their first gaming table. But they've been making kids gaming tables for years, which don't have to be as sturdy, obviously, because it's kids. But essentially, they have a kids table that is the smaller gaming table on their thing. The dimensions are almost exactly the same. And I thought, well, shit, if they've already got a kids one and they just made it sturdier, and now they made a bigger one and they made it even more sturdy because it's holding more, the legs are holding more weight. But I'm rambling now. So yeah, pull the trigger, gaming table.
It's an amazing looking table. I can't wait to play on it when you get it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of people that complain like, oh, you've got, the company name Nilo written in, engraved into the side. Is there a way that we can not do that so my dining room table doesn't look like it's got a word, like whatever,
Whatever.
Yeah.
To all my other shit is branded.
It's not a huge downside,
Yeah, and it looks nice.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I loved the idea of the dining tabletop, which I thought was a free. I thought with the 5x3 level at that level, I thought it came with it.
Almost no gaming table that you buy will give you a dining topper. They're all extra charge.
Looks good though.
But even still, it's like $179 for the dining topper.
Yeah.
All righty. So moving into announcements. First of all, before we jump into the one that we have listed, just a couple of things based on current events. So first of all, we hope that anyone who's been in the path of the most recent hurricane is safe. We know that within New York State, there's been power outages in New York and Connecticut, and a lot of heavy rains and things like that. So I'm sure it was worse to the south where it made landfall originally. So hopefully, if you're listening and you were in the path of the hurricane, we hope that you are safe and doing well. And then also, our hearts go out tonight for anyone who was in that explosion earlier today. I believe that was
Lebanon.
That was Lebanon, right? That explosion. I don't think we know. I don't think we really know what's going on yet. I mean, there have been many speculations of what it was. Yeah. I don't think there's been anything confirmed, and I know that people have lost their lives and many people have been injured. And if you watched the video, it's
pretty horrific and amazing to watch.
It's terrifying.
Yeah,
it starts as like, oh, there's a big fire going on, and then that explosion is like completely. Yeah. I don't even have words for it. Like, it's just terrifying. So anyway, our hearts go out to people who, for the people who've been killed and people who've been injured today.
Yeah.
Our one other announcement, which is incredibly trivial compared to both of those things, is just our Star Trek Watch Club is continuing. I'm not even going to talk about it very much. We're into week 10. This is taking us into season 7, the final season of our watch list, which means that in the next couple of weeks, get ready for the DS9 Watch Club, because I am hard at work compiling that list, which is a much harder list than the TNG list. Imagine. Well, largely because Deep Space Nine is not episodic. So it isn't self-contained and it can't just easily drop pieces. It's a lot more complicated.
Just week 9's episode list, just some amazing episodes. Some I'd seen before, others that I'd heard of, but never actually gotten a chance to see. So if this week's episodes are as good as last week's episodes, I'm excited.
So it's tough for me because I don't think season 7 is the strong. I actually think season 5 is the strongest season of Next Generation. 6 and 7, I think are good, and I think I have cherry picked what I think are the best ones that you're going to see. But I think it is, in my opinion, I don't think it ends with a fury. It ends well. That's good. It's a solid ending to the series, and it's good. But I think by 7, it starts to show its age a little. Unlike when we get to season 7 of Deep Space Nine, when you will just be like, "What?"
Yeah. Enough said there. That sums it up.
But needless to say, in the next coming weeks, one of the episodes that's going to be coming up is Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Which is the TNG episode of Lower Decks is an amazing episode, and I can't wait for us to see it. But anyway, enough about that. If you wanted to just catch up on the tail end of it, you could follow us by just going out to the forums to catch up on the Watch Club. If you are holding out because you are waiting for the Deep Space Nine Watch Club to start, announcements will be coming out for that in the next week or two as I get everything together. I have the first part of the list done, but I really want to get the whole list done, and I'll start putting together a new forum for it. So there'll be a separate forum for the DS9 Watch Club and all of that. And we'll start putting announcements in Slack and on Twitter and stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's all we got.
I believe that is it for the announcements.
Hang on. I see that this is a workshop.
This is a workshop.
Yep.
All right. I've taken a sip of water.
All right.
You've prepared. Okay.
Here we go.
Workshop. It's all about villains. It's about those villains that keep haunting you and chasing down and taking all your stuff and trapping you and making you shake your fist in anger. It's all about the villains in the workshop.
Don't suck. Oh man.
Richards. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. Whew. All right. Who gets to fire this one off?
I will. Because this all started because Bob and I were talking about the topic of villains recently. And what makes a good villain, what makes a bad villain, what happens when you end up with a villain that the GM thinks is good, but the rest of the players just aren't interested in. And we thought it might make a good topic. But we were kind of concerned that it might be too short of a topic. And so we tossed it to Phil, and sure enough, he found a way to turn it into a full episode.
Carry on, Phil Vecchione.
So, Phil, I assume if we're going to get into this topic, we're going to need a definition first.
Ooh. Yes, we do.
Behold, you are in the presence of Definition Panda.
Epic sounding bumper is epic.
It is.
Yeah. So we do need some definitions, and I want to pull out two definitions I found for villain because I kind of liked both of them for different reasons. So the first one is the one that I think when we say villain is what people immediately jump to, which is a cruelly malicious person who is involved or devoted to wickedness or crime, and then scoundrel. Right? I like that. Right? That's how I picture villains. But for the purposes of the RPG, I actually like this next definition a little better. A character in a play, novel, or the like, role-playing game, who constitutes an important evil agency in the plot. So let's take a moment and talk about that second definition, right? So a villain is a character, an NPC, of which we can ascribe the description of the first definition to, right? Wickedness, scoundrel, criminal, that kind of thing. But I think really the important part is this next part, right? Which is the evil agency in the plot, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning that this NPC is going to advance the plot through evil actions. And that is like really what encapsulates a villain. Now, a villain can be both of these things, right? So they can be an evil acting scoundrel who does evil things.
For example, Baron Von Badass, thank you for the boot, who plans on opening a rift to the Slayer of Worlds in your game.
Yeah, sure, right? Like totally badass, kind of thing. Or they can appear to be good and neutral, but still advance an evil plot.
For example, the temple leader who, through their desire to bring about peace, is repressing freedoms of all the people in the city.
Yeah, right? Like both of those are villainists. And they both work in a game, right? They both, depending on the game you're running, both of those characters are very playable NPCs.
Sorry about that. But we have to separate villains from the opposition. Because in a game, all your villains are going to be the opposition. But not all the oppositions you're going to encounter in the game are going to be villains. So let's first talk about what's not a villain.
Right. So non-character forms of opposition, right? Natural disasters, traps, environment, those kinds of things.
Yep. Also, creatures living in the dungeon minding their own business until adventurers come along.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, from the monster's point of view, you adventurers are probably the villains in this story, right? Like
that's exactly it.
Whole bunch of goblins just living in some caves, collecting some gold that they found, and in come, the marauding horde of humans slaying everything left and right.
Well, I got to scratch my idea for villainous terrain.
Yeah, villainous terrain is out. This terrain twirls its own mustache. Okay.
Wait. Phil, you're a fan of the X-Men.
Yes.
Does Croatoa count as a villainous terrain?
Not anymore, man, because now that's a hero.
Yeah, it used to be, though.
It was. I mean, technically, that island was also a being. So the answer is yes. It would absolutely have been a villain. Although now, if you've read any of the new X-Men, that Croatoa is actually their ally and a hugely powerful ally. Anyway, we diverge. Okay. There are also scales of villains, right? So not all villains come in one size. We have minor villains, which are the kind of villains that are going to appear. They're going to come and go in the course of a single session.
For example, like a villain in a single session of a superhero game, like Stiltman.
Sure.
The villain's doing all the bad stuff, and the heroes are going to defeat them. But at the end of the adventure, they go off to super jail and probably won't be seen again for a while.
I got to tell you, Stiltman's great. That's perfect. I can't think of a better way to describe a minor villain than Stiltman, because that is exactly it, right? Like, what is his power? Well, he's got some robotic stilts and he steps on and over stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So cool. So we have minor villains for sure. And then we have like major villains, right? So like twirl the mustache, right? We have major villains. And these are the NPCs that are going to persist in a campaign.
And they're going to be different kinds. Sometimes they're going to be encountered and fought multiple times in a campaign. Think Darth Vader in the Star Wars trilogy.
Sure.
He shows up in every movie, and Luke and he actually confront each other in the second one. But they can also only be encountered in the end. Again, Star Wars, they don't encounter the Emperor to the end of Return of the Jedi.
Excellent. I mean, in fact, in Star Wars, in episode 4, Luke and Vader, I mean, in some ways do encounter each other in the trench.
True. and Han spanks his little butt. So, all right.
It's a cheap shot.
It is.
Okay. So, yeah. So, again, those are great examples, right? So, Vader is the kind of major villain, again, that appears. We see him a bunch of times. And then you're right. Like the Emperor is a thing that like is only barely talked about in episode 4. We only see the sketchy hollow thing of him in Empire. And then we finally see him when we get to Jedi.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. So major villains are often quite powerful in terms of both their own personal power level, right? So they're as well as the resources that they're able to wield.
For example, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not in the comics, the Red Skull is kind of a minor villain. He gets killed off in Captain America, the First Avenger. And that's pretty much the end of his influence in the movies. But Thanos lasts through all the movies and is constantly pulling strings until he shows up at Endgame and does a whole bunch of badness.
Yeah, I mean, Thanos is, and when we talk about resources, right? Thanos is able to give Loki like the Chitauri, right? Like the Chitauri invasion force for Avengers, like that. Like Thanos has that to give, right? Like he's got that kind of level, and then his own personal power. Like we don't really until Infinity War, we don't really get a feel for his personal power level until like he spanks the Hulk. And then, we are like, oh, okay. Like he is not only vastly powerful, he is physically powerful. Okay. All right. So now that we know what a villain looks like, and kind of know what our definition for villain is and separated what is not a villain and talked about scale of villain, we should talk about what purpose a villain serves in your game.
Well, to begin with, a villain is supposed to be a versatile tool for your game. If you have a good villain, which we'll talk about below, it's going to give you a lot of things. For example,
so a villain right up front is opposition, right? A villain is opposition for your players. Minor villains can be like direct opposition. So, your team of street level heroes can go beat up on Stiltman for an adventure. That's great. And a major one might be something you encounter through minions, like perhaps we're not going to fight Dr. Doom a bunch, but we are going to fight Doom bots, here and there throughout our campaign.
The other thing is the villain's going to be an NPC. And this gives the GM somebody to play in the game, somebody to portray. As the GM, you're going to get to show what this character is, show their personality, show their evil acts, their manipulations, sometimes even have conversations with the party in places where neither side can fight. Oh. You get a chance to gloat, you get a chance to twirl your mustache, and of course, you get a chance to monologue. And what villain doesn't like to monologue?
Oh, I mean, listen, I know it's a trope, but every GM should get to enjoy a good monologue. Like, find a place for it in your game and monologue away. It is so satisfying.
I shoot him in the face with an arrow.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt your monologue?
Oh my God, I love that. I love that scene from what is it? The Gamers. Oh God, the scene with the Prince of Crime or something, and I forget the character's, the NPC's name. Okay, a villain is also potential character hook, right? So having an established villain in your campaign gives you a place for players to hook into their backgrounds, relationships. Maybe somebody is the child of the villain. Maybe the villain has wiped out part of their family. Whatever it is, using the villain as part of your character background and using that for hooks, that's drama fuel, right? Like if you're Senda, that's a 40 ounce bottle of drama fuel waiting to be drunk.
So the other thing that a villain's going to give you is a story arc. The villain's going to persist more than one session, and this gives you a chance to use them as an antagonist for the whole story arc. This can be a contiguous set of sessions as the player struggling with the villain, or it can be sessions that are interspaced with other storylines. For example, go back to the arc of the Misdirected episode, but it's a good thing to use when you've got a story, if you want to do side quests. It's something to bring the players back to the main plot, is you've got this villain who could be their constant nemesis along the way.
Yeah, and we'll talk later in our kind of open thing about tips for villains and stuff. And I will say that whether you're going to do a contiguous arc or an interspersed arc really has to do with how long you would like this villain to be in your game. Which gets us to the other part. A villain can also be the whole campaign. It can be the campaign arc. Yeah. Like, you can build a whole campaign on defeating a villain. I did. The Throne of the Demon King, which was a whole game predicated on, we knew from the day we made characters that this game ended when you defeated the Demon King.
3 years.
3 years of campaign play to get there. And it was glorious. Like, and the other thing about it is, it defined the campaign. And two, from day one, the players never lacked direction on what to do next.
Right.
Like, even if they were at a crossroads, there was always this goal ahead of them. Like, well, whatever we do, we still have to work towards defeating the Demon King. So which one of these choices gets us to that, or which gets us faster? Or which one do we need more at this point in the game? And it does an amazing job of bringing focus and clarity to a game, because you just know, like, every time you sit down, this thing is kind of sitting over the entire game. So, making it a campaign arc is a perfectly fine way to use a villain.
Some of the Al-Qadim, I think it was Lost Cities, had an entire campaign arc that was based around the idea that there was this villain that was coming back and the players eventually had to stop her.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job of having like one adventure every 3 levels, all the way up to level 20, where brought the players back to that quest. So even if you were doing other things, level 1, level 3, level 6, level 9 was back again dealing with the rise of this character. And did a good job of keeping that campaign back on track, but also allowed for room for the players to go off and explore their stories.
Yeah, which I think is great, right? Like if you think about it like if you think about a campaign, and I often do, like a TV series, right? Like all of a sudden having like, oh, this is the episode, right? Like here comes the adventure where we have to, once again encounter so-and-so. Those things are terribly fun. Cool.
I like this. I'd actually like to toss in real quick that if you haven't looked at the Al-Qadim box sets, they were a very good example of how to do campaign arcs. That's some of the story for the day, but I'd just like to toss that in there.
I will also note that with a warning that they are 80s D&D books.
Yes.
Written about a
Middle Eastern culture.
Yeah.
with probably no Middle Eastern writers on board. I don't say that knowing that for sure.
Yeah.
But I just put my 80s warning stamp. Like
you are likely to encounter some kind of problematic issue.
Yes. It probably has the same challenges and troubles that Oriental Adventures has. We'll just leave that all right there.
Yes.
So to Jerry's point, it has very good information on arcs. I will also refer back, if you want really good information on arcs, go check out Arc of the Misdirected, a podcast episode we did a while ago, but I still think stands
very well.
Stands up pretty well over time. Anyway, cool.
All right. So now that we know what villains bring to a game, the next question that people ask us is, why should you use a villain like this in your game?
Yeah, I mean, the point here is like, you can run a game without a villain, right? Because you can always have opposition, but a villain is a very special kind of opposition. So villains, like you're going to do this because villains give you certain things. And I think for the sake of time, like we could probably sit here and like go a whole episode listing out things, but I think we'll just touch on two of the really big ones.
First is going to be continuity, because continuity from a villain standpoint is that the villain will be used in a story, multiple stories, the campaign arc, or guest appearances to help create an actual campaign that's more than just random stories and adventures that go off in different directions. They're going to give you some continuity. They're going to be the NPCs, which the characters have history with. The NPCs are going to show up again and again, so the players have something to refer back to. They can also grow and change over time. They can become more competent, less competent. They can even become part-time allies of the adventures if you play it right.
They can be sympathetic, right?
Yep, very sympathetic. And lastly, in campaigns, it's good to have the passage of time. And as the villains change, you can use their actions and their plots and machinations to show how the world is growing and changing.
Yeah, I think those are all really powerful. I think the other thing that a villain gives you is emotional investment. Right? A villain creates emotional investment for a player, especially major villains, right? Stiltman is not going to give you emotional investment. Dr. Doom, on the other hand, is going to give you some feels. Having multiple interactions with villains over many sessions is going to start creating strong emotions in your players, especially when the villain does things that affect the world of the player, right? So, the Demon King in his anger raises the town that one of the players is from, right? Like that, like those kinds of things, right? Those kinds of things, the attacks against, the characters' NPCs, even the attacks against the characters that they survive and so does the villain survive. All of those things are going to build up that emotional investment in the villain. And that's really, I mean, if we're really talking about the key here, why do you have a villain? This is it, right? Like you want your players to hate this villain. You don't want them to be indifferent to them. You don't want them to be annoyed by them, like in our funny opening. You want hate.
Yeah.
You want players who become enraged, obsessed, like they become single-minded about these villains. And that is when you know you have done your job correctly.
I mean, let's face it. You could have had Raiders of the Lost Ark with Indy just facing off against Nazis the whole movie.
Sure.
But you throw Belloc in there.
There you go.
And he keeps popping up and stealing the prize, getting in the way. And you get to the end of the movie and you're like, oh, I hate this guy.
And then when you find out his fate, you're like,
yeah,
satisfying, right? Like tastes good.
Except that in that case, the player characters had almost nothing to do with his defeat.
Which is bad if you're playing the role-playing game. It's fine if you're watching the movie, right? I wouldn't advise the end
point that out.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. I wouldn't advise the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark as the way to finish an adventure. I would totally recommend it as the way to finish a movie.
Yes.
But no, in really what you want if you were going to do that as a player-facing game is that one of the players grabs Belloc by the back of the neck, throws open the ark and shoves his head in it for a second.
Or
right?
the druid leans over and goes, hey, don't worry about it. And they're like, what? And they open up the ark and he's like, I snuck in and I put a cloud kill in there.
Right, exactly.
He opens it up and a cloud kill comes out.
Yeah, I like you definitely want which I'm going to get to my last point of this, right? Is a villain is also Chekhov's gun, right? Like if you're going to put a villain in your game, you had better, by the time you end the arc, the campaign, or whatever you've set out for this for this villain, you had better bring the players into a scene where they can defeat them. I'm not saying they're going to, but I'm saying you need to have that moment.
They need the opportunity.
You have to have the showdown, right? The showdown is necessary. How the showdown plays out, that's different, but the showdown must occur. You cannot, for lack of better word, and I'll just use this word, you cannot edge them with the villain and never deliver the showdown. I'm just gonna leave that terminology right there where it is.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
There you go. Thank you. We'll just leave that right there.
Without using that term, I will tell you I was in a campaign where the villain that we hated got killed off screen.
Oh!
We showed up in town, and they're like, "Oh," partially because the villain was actually the DM's like favorite player character he put in the game, and didn't realize that we all saw them as the villain and hated them so much that we were derailing the campaign to go kill them, so we just had them die off screen. And we all felt very defeated by that.
Yes, that's terrible. That's a ruined villain. Again, let's not extend this metaphor any further than it has to go, but it's essentially a ruined villain.
Now, to their argument, they didn't see this character as the villain. This was their Mary Sue character that was supposed to join the party.
Well,
but the party saw them as the main villain in the campaign.
Yes.
All right then.
All right.
Which is important because that brings us to our next topic, which is
what makes a good villain, right? Like not every character is a good villain. So
not every villain is decently run. So
correct.
Because a good villain has to achieve a few things and avoid a few things. And we say this because I've been in a campaign, I'm in one now, where there is absolutely no emotional investment in that villain. That is obviously the main focus of our campaign. And when they finally get killed, it's going to be a meh at the end. So how do you make them better? First, and most importantly, number one, you want to make them a compelling character. They need to be something or someone the characters will want to engage, and one that will evoke emotions in the characters. It's not just enough they're doing bad things. Like, you want the players and the characters to want to actually deal with them, engage with them, encounter them, fight with them.
Feel for them.
Feel for them, yeah. Have some feeling more than, well, maybe if we stop them, it's a good thing.
I mean, if we go back to Marvel for a second, right? We talk about comic books. Like, what is one of the key things about Victor Von Doom? Like, what is it about his mother?
Oh, yeah. She's trapped in hell. Well, she, depending on which universe we're in, she's trapped in hell.
Yeah, and he dedicates a considerable effort to getting her out of hell.
Yep.
Right. He's compelling, right? Like, yes, Dr. Doom is evil, But I loved Doctor Doom's appearances in about every comic book I've ever seen him in. Like, I love him. I love Doom. He is a very compelling character.
Yep.
Okay. Villains also need to have interesting plans, right?
Yes.
The evil they enact has to also be compelling and make the players want to thwart them.
Yes.
Like, if the villain's like, I'm going to blow up, this area and no one really cares about it, it's not that villainous, right? Or I'm going to open the portal to the neutral god of, beige, right? And everybody's like, whatever, dude. Like,
that's the kind of villain that the heroes stop and have hostess snack cakes after they defeat him.
Yeah. They're just like, whatever, dude. That's fine.
I'm going to burn down the Louvre. It's just a museum. Art can be remade. That kind of situation.
Ouch. I got some feels about that. But anyway, but yeah, so whatever they do, besides they being compelling, whatever they do has to also be compelling, which is going to put some work on you as a GM, but do your work. Okay, what else?
And part of that is learning what are the motivations of the characters.
Yes. And read the players, right? Like, like you said, your GM had a GMPC that they thought was like, going to be the friends of the party, and yet the whole party is like ready to like shiv this guy. You got to read the room on that, right? So I mean, the good heel turn on that is like, oh, you guys don't want to adventure with me? Fine, I'll show you all that I'm the better adventurer, and go full villain. Yeah.
And feel free to sometimes make a character that you thought was a hero into a villain if the players see them that way and have some emotional investment in stopping them.
Oh,
it's okay to move that around.
I love fallen heroes. I'll give you an example of a movie fallen hero that I absolutely love is the general from The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is a fallen hero, right? Like, he is a hero. He's a compelling character. Yep. He has a very interesting plan. He's going to launch VX gas all over San Francisco if he doesn't get the things he wants. But the things he wants are like, they're like, it's compelling, right? You're just like, when you learn that he's like doing this for his men, you're just like, oh, like it. Fallen heroes are, I think, really good when it comes to evoking emotional responses because players are heroes. And it doesn't take much for a player to see the distance that it takes to go from being the hero to being the villain.
It's especially good when you have the players sympathize with the villain's desires and needs, just not the methods they're willing to use to get there.
Yeah, that's
pull that. That's good,
and that's what that's The Rock, the villain in that doesn't really isn't willing to gas San Francisco when he realizes that his bluff has been called.
Right,
and the good guys kind of say, okay, we understand why he's upset, and he's right, he has been screwed over, but this is not the way to resolve this problem.
Exactly, it's the other two guys in the room that turn out to be the bigger villains.
When it's just ha, we want to gas San Francisco bad guys, those are the ones that the players probably won't have as much connection with.
Nah.
And it makes for a very good scene.
I, for instance, love, we'll just take it a little aside here. Like, I, for instance, love Hans Gruber, right? But Hans Gruber is not a sympathetic villain in any way at all. He's a cool villain, right? So
he's charismatic.
Yes, Hans Gruber is a compelling character, right? And his plan is actually, like, his plan seems interesting on the surface, but the beauty of Die Hard is that when you really get down to it, it's not, right? It gets revealed in the vault that like you're just stealing money, right? And he's
just a common thief.
I am an exceptional thief.
And since I'm moving up to kidnapping.
Yes. Yep. But yeah, Hans Gruber is very different from the general in The Rock in that Hans is cool and we really like Hans. And I really like the general too, because the general's He's also charismatic. He's a great leader and all of that. But they wind up being very different villains because I feel for the general.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cheering when Hans falls off the building. Right?
Spoiler alert, Hans falls off the building.
Listen, I think we're far enough along that if you haven't seen it, I can't help you at this point.
It's not Christmas till Hans Gruber falls off Nakatomi Plaza.
That's right. Oh no, is that another hostage?
Yeah. The best
I hope
villain,
it's not another hostage. That's the line.
The best villains are the ones who don't think they're villains.
Yeah.
You've got you've got the Demon King. The Demon King knows he's the villain. He knows he's the villain. Hans Gruber knows he's the villain.
Yeah.
But there are some villains out there who don't see themselves as the villain at all. And they make for really compelling characters if played properly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
All right.
So what's another feature of a good villain?
They should be tough, but not impossible to beat. And this is a little bit of a balancing act because they need to be tough enough to give the players a good fight. But it's not impossible. They can never be beaten. And with different game systems, this is something you might need to play around with a little bit.
I, for one, don't like major villains in Savage Worlds. Or at least I don't like putting my major villain anywhere where the player can get a shot in Savage Worlds because it's one of those moments where it's like, oh, I hit with a raise. 8, 8, 8, 8. Oh, 40 points of damage, GM.
Well, they have solved that partially with the new system.
Oh, did they?
You can never have more than 3 wounds to roll against, so you no longer have to roll against 40 dice. Once you top out at 3 wounds, that's all you have to make the save for. And you can also put in quote unquote rescue bennies, where basically the GM spends all his bennies and he's gone. The bad guy's gone, he escapes.
Oh, okay. So I like that because that's kind of like Fate where you can concede the fight, right? So that you can be in the middle of a villain fight and then I could just be like, you know what? The villain gives up. He's going to give up this fight. The condition is he gets away. I
don't know which setting it is that had the thing where the villain gives up the fight, but then for that point on can never always is down 1 Benny. So next time the players encounter them, they're down 1 resource.
Oh,
so
interesting.
So the villain not only gets away, but the players have succeeded in also reducing how tough they're going to be in the future. So the villain,
that's cool.
So yes, he gets away with the players hey, we got one of his bennies. He's not going to be as tough next time, and have that minor victory, which we're going to talk about later on how important that is.
So tough, not impossible is very important. I'll tack on to that. The next thing is I think a good villain is flawed, right? A good villain should not be a Mary Sue, right? They need to have a weakness either in power or personality. The players have to have some belief that this character can be defeated. So flawed as goes hand in hand with tough but not impossible. If for instance, Cthulhu is a terrible villain, right? Cthulhu is impossible and not flawed, and you're not going to win.
I'm going to challenge you on that because I think that we're talking about here is 2 different things. Defeated and killed are different things.
That's fine
because if you can, for example, drive Cthulhu away for the next 3,000 years. You've succeeded in defeating him for now. So
that would be fine as long as there is a valid way to defeat him. If you can't fight him, but you can affect something that makes him go back into the ocean. Then he is not impossible, right? But
go ahead, keep going.
No, I was just gonna say. But if something's like a straight up fight with Cthulhu, and it's no, Cthulhu just waves his hand, and you all, you're dead.
Yeah,
that's not fair.
A good example of that would be the head of Arasaka, whose name escapes me at the top of my head, from Cyberpunk. You're probably never going to actually fight him,
right?
But if you can make it to the point where he has to pull up shop and leave the city,
you've won. Yeah, and that's a different win condition, right? Which is important when talking about villains. It's a little bit more than we're going to talk about tonight, but stakes and things like that. Like, what are the stakes for this conflict?
The beefness.
Tell me about another thing that they should have.
They have to have a realistic motivation. They have to be doing this for something. And it should make sense. It shouldn't just be, I'm doing this because I'm disturbed. I'm doing this because, ha, 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 I'm evil. The villain who's going to destroy the world and he's on it is less interesting than the villain who's going to do something, destroy the world, but, have a reason for doing so and get off world. You need to have a motivation that makes sense, that the players can kind of link into and often interfere with.
I mean, to some extent, and I have some issues about this regarding the Infinity Gauntlet, but Thanos has a purpose in the MCU, right?
Yes.
I mean, Thanos had a purpose also in the regular Marvel comics, but
it was stupid.
That purpose was stupid.
It was stupid.
Yeah, impressing a girl
Yes.
by destroying half the universe. I mean, she is death is not a great motivation. But his idea that the universe is overpopulated and I'm going to thin it out is great, except for the fact that you have the Gauntlet and the Infinity Stone, so you could have just fixed the problem the other way. Yep. By just making the universe okay with the current size of people, but we won't get into that. Yep. Thanos had a plan. Yeah. He may not have thought it all the way through with the Gauntlet, but he had a plan, and he had a reason. Like, he has that moment in Infinity War where he shows Tony what Titan looked like, right? Yeah. He was like, here it was, and it was this paradise, and now it's all ruined, and now I'm going to fix the universe because I couldn't fix Titan when it originally fell. And that gives us a feel, right? Like, oh, this person's committed.
Your villain's motivation could be flawed as long as their reason for doing it makes sense. Like Thanos's plot, like Thanos's plan has a lot of problems that are like, if you sat down and thought about them long and hard, would make trouble. But Thanos is disturbed, and his plot logically follows what his delusions are.
Yeah, and I think not to read too much into the MCU, but I think part of Thanos's problem is that he started solving that problem before he had the Infinity Gauntlet. So he gets to the hammer problem, right? Like, the only way he knows how to fix this problem is he just keeps like killing half of planets. So when he gets the Gauntlet, like, he doesn't stop and be like, what other possibilities lie open to me? He's more like, I could just do the thing I've always been doing, but bigger.
Yeah.
Someone with a more altruistic attitude would have been like, oh, we can just make sure that the universe has enough resources for everyone.
Right. Or somebody with more imagination. Like, it's entirely possible, for as awesome as Thanos is, that he just lacks the imagination to solve this problem any other way. And again, I know this is all just speculative MCU stuff, and Twitter's going to blow up later because we've said all this stuff. But whatever, we're trying to make a point for.
It's a fun debate. It's okay.
I don't know if it's a fine debate. It's definitely a debate.
It's definitely a debate.
I avoid. Bob likes to go into those videos and chat rooms and stuff that talk about the MCU stuff, and I'm like, I'm just going to watch the movies. Like, no hypothesis here, please. Okay. We do need to avoid some things, though, right? So we touched on one of these in a second ago, and I'll bring it back up. We need the villain not to be a Mary Sue, right? We need the villain not to be perfect in every way possible. I don't even know if Mary Sue is the right word anymore. I don't know. Whatever. Let's just keep it simple. The villain cannot be flawless, right? We just talked about it being flawed. We do not want our villain to be flawless, because a villain who is perfect in every way, if players think that they can't be beat, players will disengage from the villain. Like, oh, this villain is untouchable, therefore it's stupid for us to get involved. We should just avoid rather than confront.
Yep, we're going to go over here instead.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep. Excuse me. The second thing is, you don't want them to be the ultimate player foil. This kind of follows the same thing. Don't make them such that they simply negate everything that the players have. Oh. If the players can read minds, then all of a sudden all of their flunkies have their mind wiped. Don't nerf your players. And also, don't have their plans continually make the player successes into a moot point. Hey, we won this fight, but the villain still got to do this. And I've been in games like that where the villain is always 2 steps ahead of the players. So something occurs, the players go to stop it. They struggle hard and they succeed at defeating this. It turns out this was just a distraction, so the villain can get away with this other thing they didn't know about. And when that happens enough times, you're just like, oh, we're fighting this guy again. yeah, we're just going to wait until he gets away with his thing because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's okay to do that like once, because then the players will be like, oh, this villain is smart. But yeah, if you do that every time, it's like, oh, this player, like this, again, this villain is too smart. We should not engage.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing is your villain should not just be evil for shock value.
Right.
Just doing evil things in order to get the players to gasp is a cheap way to get emotional investment. And I say this because I have made this villain before. I did this to a set of players in a horror game.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the effect that I think is expected. So I made this. So we were playing Whispering Vault. I made this villain. It was an architect, which is the high level bad guy. And her name was Mistress Aryan. And she shaped flesh. So I proceeded to have, after a couple of encounters, the players made their way into her lair. They found all these like living human sculptures that she made. And each one was like just one body horror thing after the other. By the way, this was like the 90s. I was not the best GM at the time. I was doing, safety. Safety was not a thing that we talked about. Like,
however, we were all on board with it for the most part.
People were mostly consenting along the way, but it got to a point where I had like written up some of these sculptures, and I was like, these are gonna be really sick and evil, whatever. And after like the first one or two, you guys were like, fuck it. We murder all of these sculptures. Like, we're putting them out of their misery.
Yep, and suffering.
Now we're in a beeline right for Mistress Aryan to finish her off.
Yeah, she deserves to die now after all of that crap.
Right. She's clearly a monster. She's clearly beyond all reproach. Let's just put it in the ground and throw it back in the vault, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, hang on 1 second. Hang on. Hello. We're going to be visited by my daughter, who's now going to hang out quietly.
Oh.
We're going to hang out quietly, right, Rose? Okay. Nice and quiet. Hang out.
Today is Tuesday. You know what that means.
I assume it's raining, sweetheart?
Guest.
Okay. All right.
For
so
those
anyway.
Old enough to remember the Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah. So, so the whole thing just like fell apart, right?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't really work. I wasn't like it as much as you guys remember it, it really wasn't as dramatic of a villain. I don't really think it kind of carried it off. It just became more of an opposition, like something
mostly.
to fight. So I feel like it pretty much fell short. So yeah, evil for evil shock value is not really worth the effort. Jer, you want to talk about the last thing that goes with that?
Yeah, you don't want to have the villain be completely untouchable. While it's useful to keep the villains out of the hands of players early on, eventually they have to be able to get their hands on them. You can't make the villain to the point where the players feel they're never going to actually be able to get close to them, never track them down. And occasionally, if the players play really well, you might have to step that up if they actually catch the villain early. That's when it's good to have villains have flunkies. But
yes, I mean, I think that flunkies, lieutenants, and things like that are the ablative armor of villains.
That's
right?
a good way to put it.
You sacrifice key lieutenants and captains and stuff so that the players feel progress, but still keep the villain out of reach.
Yep.
So you can't let the players always defeat Doom bots and never get to Doom.
Right.
Because and Doom, and this is the problem with Doom, right? Because there's no really hierarchy of villains. But if you have an organization where you've got, the Red Skull at the top or whatever, and you beat some of the other Hydra folks along the way as you climb the ladder, that feels like progress. Like you are getting closer to the Red Skull because we have collected the following bad guys in various battles along the way.
That's right.
All right, cool. So we've dug into what makes a villain, what they are, what they can do, what they bring to the game. We've talked about how to make good ones. But now we need to take a break. We're going to check in with the chat room in a moment to see what questions they might have about villains. And we're going to first ask Bob to tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yeah, buddy. So you should absolutely check out Pandas Talking Games. Phil and Senda answer your questions about RPGs from the perspective of one-shots and campaigns with some panda silliness. If you listen to it, you will love it.
You will.
Trust me.
That is truth.
True facts.
Those are facts. Facts, as my son would say.
All right.
Cool. Does our chat room have anything that they would like to add to our discussion for tonight? I see them chatting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Savannah brought up a point, the story she's heard, where villains were not always villains. They became villains through events that happened to them.
I love those villains.
Evil is not born, it is made.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of classic villains where if you dig into their backstory, you can see what pushed them over the edge into that pattern of behavior.
Yep, and I think that's what falls under that realistic motivation, right? Like what turned this villain. Now, I will say this, right? There's an argument for the what created the villain, right? Like the pathology of how this person became a villain, which also ties into often their motivation and what they want to do, killer. Right? Yeah. Like Captain, what is it? Captain Cold from Batman, right?
Yeah.
Wait. Which one? No, Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze. Captain Cold's the lamer one. Yeah. Mr. Freeze, right?
Yeah.
Like Mr. Freeze is like all about saving his wife, right? And is willing to do some pretty horrific things to reach that goal. And so you have sympathy, like you feel, if done correctly, you feel for this character. But there are other times where something that is utterly horrible for the sake of horrible can have its moments, right? Like, because in those cases, sometimes that kind of evil is terrifying because it just exists, right? Like we like to sometimes be able to explain away our evil, like, oh, this person, they were good, or, oh, this terrible thing happened to them, so now they're bad. And then sometimes evil is evil. And I think one of the best examples of that is Heath Ledger's Joker.
Yes.
Yeah. Heath Ledger's Joker is utterly terrifying, and they don't bother with any kind of background, right? Like they don't do an origin story for that character. It shows up. It's random, violent, scary, and it seems to have no real agenda. In fact, once he's talking to Harvey Dent, he doesn't have an agenda, right? He just looks at Harvey and he's like, I'm not really do I look like I'm the planning sort of guy?
Yes.
Right? And it's terrifying because that kind of evil is also something that that kind of evil is very upsetting to us because when we can't understand it, right? It's kind of one of the things that makes Lovecraftian horror also compelling is that when we can't even understand it, it terrifies us even more. And so I like both of those, right? I like some of my villains with good explanations and pathology, and I like some of my villains to be utterly horrifying and alien to connect with.
If you do it right, if you write the adventure right, you can have villains who are villains because of the actions of the characters. And that made by the
what's his face? The bad guy from the Impossibles?
Oh, the Incredibles.
Incredibles. The Incredibles.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, the villain
Syndrome.
from Syndrome. Yes. Right. Made by the heroes.
Yep.
Now I'll say this in my so for my my L Hall campaign, the Demon Lord, I started the Demon Lord off for a long time as if like this thing's just evil and like it's just evil being evil kind of thing, and left it like that for a long time. And I didn't until like almost the end of the campaign reveal that really what it was all the bad parts of the good god that the good god shoved into the ground and hid away. because they wanted to be the good god, and they just shoved all of their bad stuff into the ground and buried it, hoping it would never be found, and then it got found because you can't bury that kind of stuff. So even the demon lord, like, there's nothing redeemable about the demon lord, but the revelation is like, oh, the good god and the demon lord are really just the parts of one god, and like,
surprise.
You mentioned Mr. Freeze. Have you ever seen the theoretical this discussion of Wonder Woman and Batman, where she's like, so tell me again about Mr. Freeze? Well, he's this scientist who goes around stealing money and high-tech equipment so he can find a cure for his wife. And that's his motivation. Yeah, all he's doing is just trying to get things to save his dead wife. And you're Batman. You're Bruce Wayne. You, like, own the biggest scientific think tank in the city, and you have unlimited resources, right? He's like, yeah, why? She's like, no reason.
Right. That you have to punch again, when all you have is a hammer, right?
Yep.
Like, also, Batman lacked the imagination to solve this problem.
Without punching it, yes.
You know what, Freeze? I'm going to introduce you to my buddy Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. Yep.
He's got some tech people. They're going to blow your mind.
You know who would actually solve that problem that way is the modern versions of Iron Man.
Yes.
The modern writings. Tony Stark would actually solve that problem as Tony Stark, inventor, billionaire.
Yeah.
That's good.
My biggest superpower is my pocketbook, is my checkbook. So yeah.
Oh my God. I still love that moment in the Avengers. What happens if we take away the armor?
Billionaire playboy philanthropist.
Genius.
Yeah.
Playboy billionaire philanthropist. And then everybody in the room just kind of looks and goes, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
He is kind of the only one who created his own superpower. So, you know.
Is Batman a hero? Batman is probably not really, by definition, a hero. He's definitely not a villain. Batman's the best definition of anti-hero.
Well, Batman's the hero that Gotham needs.
Which says a lot about Gotham, right?
It says a lot about Gotham.
Let's just be clear. It says more about Gotham than it says about Batman.
I think so too.
Anyway.
But that was a good. Thank you for all the discussion from the chat room. Anything else, Bob?
We're good for now.
All right.
Moving on.
All right. So in our second segment, we're going to do our traditional roundtable. We have a few questions about villains, and the first question is,
in games that you have run or played, who has been your favorite villain, and what stood out about them? I'm going to just preface this with, please, yes, we're asking each other to tell about your character, but please be gentle about telling about your character.
Villain, I think that in the Eberron campaign that Bob and I are both playing right now, Merrick Stakanath, who is one of the heads of the Dragonmark houses in the fantasy city. Basically, he's the head of the biggest big super corporation. Is a very crafty villain who for the first half of our campaign arc was kind of our main adversary, but he was an adversary we respected. He showed up several times, completely untouchable, because even though we had to stop him, we couldn't actively act against him, because doing so would have brought like all of the city guard down upon us and then some. Mm-hmm. There were several times that we stood in a room with him and argued with him, knowing that we couldn't do anything. He had several layers of villains. He had flunkies. He was involved in actually using us to take out other enemies that he had that were also bad guys. Because Chris is very good at writing villains like this, in the last part of the campaign arc, we actually allied with him to take out a bigger threat that led us on to the next part of our campaign. Yep. So he was a villain we respected. We hated him. We knew we couldn't fight him initially, but man, we kicked the snot out of a bunch of his flunkies, and it felt good. And that was the whole thing. Whenever we encountered him, we knew it was going to be a great. We looked forward to encountering him, even if we didn't fight him. We knew that any encounter that he was going to be in was going to be interesting. It was going to move the plot forward. We were going to get some information that told us what was going on, and it was going to be a fun adventure. And that's what I want to see out of villains in campaigns.
I think that's a great. I think it's a great kind of villain, right? The kind of villain that you both want to defeat, but also as a player, you're excited to see. right? Like that's a great mix because again, when we talk about emotional investment, right? As a player, if you're like, oh, I love when this guy shows up, like something diabolical always happens here. That's great, right? It creates that emotional investment and gets everybody charged up.
Yep.
What's interesting about the end of that story arc, at the end of that campaign, basically before we start the next one, is that in the end, we stopped his evil plan, but not all of his plans. And he ended up making us have some difficult choices about the plans that we were making. And so in order to defeat him, we both had to compromise. He had to give up something and we had to give up something. And that was the end of the campaign. For that part of it was changing our perspective and his perspective to the point where I wouldn't call him an ally, but for a while he was a patron.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that I think is one of the best, it's what happens when you have to team up with Dr. Doom to fight something bigger, and there have been Marvel stories like that work really well.
Oh yeah.
Or even better, when Doom has to lower himself to come work with you.
Yes. I mean, one of my favorite, if we're just talking about Doom for a second, one of my favorite moments, one of my favorite times Doom has to team up is in the Hickman run of the Fantastic Four with the Council of Reeds.
Yep.
Valeria needs to figure out a way to defeat the Council of Reeds. And so she recruits Dr. Doom as part of her think tank, along with like the Wizard and a few other people, all of Reed Richards' enemies, because she needs a group that basically can, play on Reed's level.
Yep.
And then in a very disturbing fashion, Valeria and Dr. Doom have a better relationship than Reed and Dr. Doom. She refers to him as uncle, like it's, and she's probably smarter than he is because she's, conceivably smarter than all of them.
Yeah.
Isn't she named after?
Well, Doom got to pick her name.
Yeah.
Again, like there's some messed up stuff going on in that. All right, Bob. That. Bob, tell me about one of your favorite villains.
Yeah, this one. As soon as I saw the name, when I opened up the notes, you had seeded that thought, and I went, "Oh, that's got to be it." I stopped and I tried to think of another one that really would stand out as much, and I'm like, "No, it's got to be this guy." So my favorite villain was a hacker named Data Spike from Phil's Conspiracy X game back in the 90s. And this guy, I played a elite hacker that worked for the NSA named Jack Spencer. And this guy was my Belloc. This guy, like half the time he was one step ahead of me. Like I couldn't figure him out. And he just got in my head so deep that every opportunity I had to try and go up against him, I was like, oh, I got to bring this guy down. And he would get away. And then I'd have another chance and he would get away. And we finally got to the climax of the arc. And I got to go face to face with this guy. And I literally, my character in my head, I could not think of anything else to do but to just cold-blooded kill this mother. I literally just pulled a gun and blew him away.
Well, you found out that he was responsible for recruiting you into the NSA.
Yeah.
And then inadvertently, because you were recruited in the NSA, you got drawn into all of this alien conspiracy stuff and saw and did things that you were not proud of. If I remember correctly, you ruined a congressman. You discredited
some nasty stuff.
Right. You did some. You guys
keeping secrets.
Yeah, you guys did some terrible things, covering things up, and so
almost got killed multiple times.
Right, and he was like he wanted to be friends with you, right? Like he was like, I recruited you. I was hoping we would be friends. Like blah blah blah, and then you were just like, nope. And just gunned him down in a parking lot.
After all that you did to me, you say now you want to be friends?
Yep.
And I thought about it for like a half a beat and went, nope. I pull my gun and I shoot him in the head.
It was a hugely emotional.
It was.
That scene was huge. Like that scene. First of all, I remember it because you as a player were totally in bleed, right? Like you were yelling like it was a good thing we lived in a duplex because it was just our building. You were yelling at Data Spike, like, you ruined my life. You're responsible for all this. And I'm trying, like he's like, but you know, we were going to be friends and whatever. And you were just like, I take out my gun and I shoot him. And I was like, whoa.
What?
And Connex does not have a forgiving combat system. So you had the advantage, and it was like, well, this is going to happen. So, yes.
Yeah, it was a thing. That was a very, very rememberable villain for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. So, so Data Spike was, I loved Data Spike. And actually my favorite part was half the campaign went by. You didn't actually know who he was. You only knew him by his handle.
Yep.
And your first face-to-face encounter with him was he offered you a ho-ho.
We met in a room on an op, and I didn't know it was Data Spike at the time, and he's like, ho-ho? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I broke a half a ho-ho off, and we shared a ho-ho together and talked about hacking. And then I found out later that was him, and I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, Data Spike totally knew it was you because he had recruited, he had tried to recruit you. So yeah, he offered you that half a ho-ho, and then later, after the op, he like texted you or something and was like, it was nice to have a snack with you or something. And you were like,
son of a bitch.
Yeah.
That was so back in the day when the vein would bulge.
Yes, I always thought I was going to kill you in the game. I really thought that was going to be the end of
man.
you.
Good times.
Yeah, I enjoyed playing Data Spike, and I honestly thought Data Spike was going to persist a lot longer in the campaign until you gunned him down in cold blood. But when you did, I was like, that's about right.
And even then, that really wasn't the end of his arc, because there was fallout from me killing him because someone saw me do it.
There was consequences and repercussions.
Yep.
So yeah.
My choice for favorite villain, I also liked Data Spike, but I didn't want to overlap with Bob. So the other one I will pick is from my more recent Masks game, which was Tesla.
Yeah.
Tony early on had decided that Tesla needed to be a character in our game because we were set in an alternate Buffalo. Actually, we were in Erie because Buffalo was destroyed by Tesla. And what comes out during the course of the campaign, and it's super convoluted, so I can't explain it in any detail where people will get all of it. But essentially, Tesla was trying to save Tesla was trying to complete an experiment, but interference from outside of time caused the experiment to fail, which shunted Buffalo and Tesla outside of the time stream. And I know, because the 25th century was going to be destroyed if Tesla had completed his experiment. So they interfered and destroyed Buffalo, as well as throwing Tesla outside the time stream. And then Tesla begins to wage a war on the 25th century through time.
Yeah.
Like sends things forward in time, sabotages time. Like it becomes clear that it becomes clear that Tesla is, one, not okay.
Yeah.
Two, Tesla's responsible for creating Tony's character, the accident that creates Tony's character. He's in a full-on war with the 25th century, who has time-traveling ability, who's trying to stop Tesla from creating these temporal incursions that will ripple through and destroy their century. And because he created Tony's character, from time to time would appear in Tony's head and would talk to Tony.
Yeah.
So he was steering Tony through most of the campaign in all the wrong directions, in preparation for trying to finally destroy the 25th century. And it winds up in this huge battle. It's great. Tesla's Tesla was a mess of a character, but he had all the things I liked. He was flawed. He was flawed. He had a realistic motivation. He was trying to save the Buffalo from being shunted out of time. And it was great. Just terribly messy. It was good. It was fun. It was fun to play Tesla too, because Tesla was kind of a maniac in terms of like megalomaniac.
It's
cool.
Tesla.
Yeah, it was Tesla, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like
Good time.
All right. So, next thing is going to be, when have you ever encountered a villain in a game that did not work out for you? So, Phil was always talking about masks.
Yeah, same campaign actually. In the beginning of that campaign, I had this villain called Cypher that was augmenting superheroes to make them like, he was basically like, what was that group in 80s Marvel? The Power Broker, the guy who's like juicing villains. So I had this whole thing going where he was juicing various villains and these like old school, like suddenly like Stiltman for like is like super tough and nobody understands why Stiltman's kicking everyone's ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kept leading up to it. I built up to it. But the problem was the Tesla thing became more interesting.
Yep.
And the players never really latched on to the to going to defeat this guy. In fact, when they finally figured out where, like, how to find him, they just handed that information over to Aegis.
Yeah,
they were just like, Aegis, this is where that Cypher guy is. You should probably go and
super cops, go arrest this villain.
That's right.
And the thing was, I just read the table, right? Like, no one really seemed to be interested in this character. Nobody was asking questions about it. So when they handed the information to Aegis thanked him very much. And that like, I just like took him off the table. Yep. Like Cypher, not a thing. Yeah. Move like, and then I was like, I'll now invest in Tesla. Like, you play the hot hand, right? Yeah. So, you throw them out there and you see what players bite on. And in this case, no one was interested. And I was like, okay, like pushed them off the table.
And that really is one of the best benefits of developing the skill of being able to read the table during a session.
Yep.
If you can pick up on what the characters and what the players are latching onto, paying attention to the clues that they give, if they focus on something, you're like, they focused on that. There's a reason.
There was no reason for I could have been stubborn. Younger Phil would have forced the issue, but like older Phil was like, okay, move along.
Yep. It makes for a much better campaign when you can recognize those facts and let that guy fade, bring this guy up, try again.
There's always another good idea.
Yep.
If there's one piece of advice I can give GMs, there's always another good idea. It's not a finite resource.
Yep.
Exactly.
Jerry, tell me about a villain that flopped for you.
As a player in a game, the main villain in the Rippers game that exists right now in the Rippers robot.
Rippers game.
The GM is good. The villain is horrible.
The material does not seem to be helping this GM get the job done.
We've got to be 10, 12, 15 sessions in. Couldn't tell you his name. I know he's annoying.
Boy, that's
but
not good.
We've never actually talked to him. He basically, we do something. He shows up in the background, sends minions after us, and then disappears with whatever it is we're trying to stop him for. He gets away with it. This is literally there was a fire at the Louvre thing, and it was all a distraction again for I think the third time that he was off doing something else to free a demon prince, and got to the point where I'm like, let the Louvre burn, because if he frees the demon prince, the end of the world is coming. End of the world means no art also, you know? We can always make more art. We can't make new world. Stop this guy. Why are we busy? And that's what he always did. He always did this. And we kind of know his plan now, but at this point, it's very he's annoying. We don't hate him. If I encountered him on the street, I'm like, oh, this guy again. We've actually considered joining him a few times because obviously he's got his shit together and our team doesn't. Not our players, but the people that are sponsoring us, our patrons. Yeah. But he's not a fun villain. We don't have any emotional investment in him. We don't really. We just kind of figured out what his plan is now, and it's bad. I mean, we have to stop. We have to stop it because we live in this world too. But we're not there doesn't seem to be a lot of motivation from anyone in the party. We have to stop him because he's evil. We have to stop him because if we don't, the world's going to end.
I give you props for continuing because I don't know that I would have gotten 12 sessions into that.
The players that I'm playing with, especially 4 or 5 of them, are just amazing, and I would play with these players in anything. And the GM's a decent GM and lets us do things. Half the time we're playing the game, like me and 2 other players are almost like doing our own shtick. We're contributing to the group, but there's a shtick going on because that's the entertaining part of the story.
Gotcha.
It's just it's a bad villain. We don't know his name. We might have been given his name by now. And it's like,
that's the point.
Listen, if you don't know the villain's name by now, it's a bad villain.
This is turn of the century Europe and Egypt. So I think his name is something like Abdullah Mustafa or something like that. Which is just there's all sorts of problems there too. But that's like that's really it. I don't think we've actually talked to him yet.
Yeah.
If we have, it wasn't memorable. The villain that we thought was the other main villain turned out not to be the main villain. Like it turns out Dracula is a bad guy, but not somebody we can fight and kill. And the main villain also exists in such a way that we can't kill off any of the other major villains now, because until we kill off him, all the others will just keep coming back because of something he did. So it's like his minions can be killed, but like Jack the Ripper, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and that all their souls are being held by this bad guy, and so we can just keep killing them over and over again. They're just going to keep coming back. So there's there is motivation to kill this guy, but like we have no investment whatsoever in this.
That's like the second last season, the second most recent season of Legends of Tomorrow.
There is also another thing that has to do with how villains work, and that is that part of the whole plot of this is that because this is the New Rippers, a lot of the plot has to do with, and this is something that happened in the original campaign that's coming back down. We're like, we were in the original campaign. We have absolutely no investment in that either. It's a poorly written series of adventures from what I'm able to tell. But the villain itself, the important thing is the villain has not incited anything. Like, we are more motivated to actually wipe out our patrons than we are to stop this guy. Because our patrons are incompetent and have caused us more trouble. And the bad guy has succeeded almost as often because we've been given bad information.
That is unfortunate.
I will say this for your Rippers game, though. It has spawned a number of show topics.
It has spawned a number of show topics. Yes. And the GM is good. Nothing against the GM because he realized what some of these problems are and is doing his best to adapt them. But we're kind of in the middle of a campaign with pre-written adventures. So
you can only do so
your
much.
GM seems like the kind of person who can read a bad novel from beginning to end. I am not that person. If I sense that this novel sucks, I'm out.
Yeah.
Well,
I have killed campaigns for way less than everything else you have described. I will be you know what? I love all of you. You are all wonderful players and I want to play with you. Let's go find another game.
Yeah.
I think it's also the fact that we've got 8 or 9 players, so about half of them just want to see this through.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But like I said, but from a villain standpoint, what it comes down to is it's a villain who did not have a name for the longest time. If we know his name, we just got it last adventure. Has shown up only to really annoy us. That wasn't the intent, but that's what happens. Is that because we never get a chance to even get a shot off at him, he just shows up, steals the thing he wants, and leaves, and then we have to deal with his minions again.
Yeah.
It means that we haven't had a chance to get a victory. We have stopped a few of his very minor plans, but it's like we've killed off 6 stormtroopers while the Death Star blows up Alderaan.
I'm going to just cite everything that we said in the past hour.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So, Bob, have you ever encountered a villain game that did not work for you?
I'm sure I have. I racked my brain while looking at the show notes, and I could not think of a good one. Phil's example of Cypher from the Mask game definitely sticks out. It's relatively fresh. I can't really think of another one, so we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, to be honest, I had to actually go look that character's name up.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, what was that? I'm like, what was that guy in the campaign that I ran like a couple months ago?
A testament to villains that didn't work is they're not memorable.
Yes. Yeah. It was totally forgettable. Like, I had to go look it up. And
like,
that's
okay. I don't remember them because they were crappy villains.
Because you don't care. again, that's the opposite of when we don't have emotional investment. We don't encode these things into memory.
All right, I'm going to spin everything out of control and go, hey, question 3, what is your best tip when it comes to having recurring villains in your game? Jerry?
Well, first of all the things we talked about before.
Yeah.
Make sure that they have a good personality. Make sure that they're creative. Make sure that their motivations are there. And be prepared as a GM that if you've got like a multi-tiered organization and the heroes seem to really focus on like Sub-Lieutenant number 2, if that's who they really want to be the main villain, it's okay to move things around a little bit. But you got to make sure that the villains have a way to escape, but the players always have a victory. If you're going to have that villain get away when the players encounter them, make sure that the players have still done something else that was like a major accomplishment. Like, okay, Dr. Doom got away, but man, we just completely don't. He's never going to be able to come back to, Simcaria again. Or we've gotten, the gauntlet of power away from him or something,
Yeah.
He gets part of his plan, but the players have to feel like they got a minor victory.
Yeah.
And mid-level villains are a great way to do this, where, Dr. Doom gets away, but you've captured the Lobos brothers, who were his main minions. And now he can't do all of this. Think about that, because as GMs, we like to plot, okay, I've got this evil plan, and it's working well. And you have to remember that as a GM, you have all the pieces. You can control the rest of the world. And the players have to have that ability to go in there. But at the same time, make him, don't go fridge anybody's, significant other or anything like that. Don't blow up their town if they've got people in it that they love. But have them wipe out the town, after the players have lost a little bit of investment in it, but still have a lot. That's wonderful. Have them kidnap the main love interest,
or wipe the town out, but like have everybody have escaped and now they're refugees. And,
exactly.
Like that hurts even more because now they're, because now they're around to also tell you how bad they feel instead of just being dead. Right?
Holy crap! It looks like he wiped out the entire town. But he didn't really. It's actually captured, and it's in a bottle on a shelf.
Now we've raised stakes.
Yeah, you think everybody's dead, and then you can counter him later in his lair, and you're like, "Holy shit! There's the town."
Right, which I think will actually segue into my piece of advice on this, which is you should only hold on to a villain until the players can no longer do anything else but think about killing this villain.
Yep.
Or defeating him, right? So, like people, I've been asked this question in sessions at conventions and things like, when do I let my players have a big, the big fight with the villain? When it's literally the only thing they can think about, right? Like when they are offered any other opportunity, adventure, and they're like, nope, Baron Von Badass dies next session. Or next session, we begin our work to defeat Baron Von Badass. At that point, don't stretch it out any longer.
Yeah.
If it's the only thing that's on their mind, it's time to deliver, right? It's time to complete the loop that you started and set them off. If you do it too early, you haven't built up enough emotional investment. If you've done it too long, they're frustrated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? You've edged them too long. They're all frustrated now, and it doesn't work. There is this sweet spot of when they can no longer do anything else but think about getting rid of this villain. That is the moment you give them exactly what they want.
Yep.
And then you give them more than they bargained for, right? So it's like Bob said, oh no, he didn't wipe out the town. It's on a shelf behind him. And he also knows when you walk in the room that he takes it and holds it up and is like, if you attack me, I'm dropping this thing, right? Like now it's on, right?
Yeah.
Like now you got them exactly where you want them. My best piece of advice is you can put your bad guy on a timeline.
Yep.
But really, you need to read your players all along the way to know when it's time.
Remember, if you edge somebody for too long, they just go numb.
Yes. Exactly.
All right.
In role-playing games.
What about you, Bob?
Here's my piece of advice from the guy who has GM'd so many things in the last 10 years. But from sitting on the player side of the table, this would totally work for me. Seed them. Okay? Someone mentions their name during a fight in the second session. Okay? You find a note in session 3. Baron Von Badass wants the MacGuffin. Get the villain's name into the players' heads before they ever even see him the first time.
Yes.
You know? You get to like session 5 and it's like, this Baron Von Badass seems like he's a real mover and shaker. He's been behind a lot of the stuff that's been going on. And then you see him and you're like, oh, that's Baron Von Badass. You know? And then things start rolling. You get that, you know? You get it into their head first. Then they run into him and they see how much of a badass he is. And they're like, oh, we got to do something about this guy. And then he starts getting in their way.
Oh, I love it. I think if you want a great example of that, the stingers for the MCU.
Sure.
Right? Like we don't see, like we only get a glimpse of Thanos in the beginning of Avengers, right? We know Loki's talking to somebody.
Yeah.
Right? And we can see like a hand.
Yeah.
I think is right.
But we don't really know who it is.
Right. And then like at the end of if I'm remembering this correctly, right? At the end, doesn't it pan up to show him sitting in the
he smiles into the camera in the post credits.
Right. Yes. Because I remember
to challenge them would be to court death.
Right. Like I remember watching the movie and I'm like, you know, ooh, because first of all, I'm like these Chitauri people, I don't even know if I remember, you know, these things, but sure, Loki's got an intergalactic army, whatever.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when they pan up and you're like, oh,
Thanos.
Right. Like, I mean, at that moment, I was like, holy shit. Right.
Like all right.
like, wow. You know, like you have now taken this movie from awesome to like
mega
a new
awesome
level, right? Like all of a sudden now we're Reality Stone, or we're Infinity Gauntlets and stones, and we're all like, it's big.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm so excited for the MCU to. I want one of two villains. I'm rooting for one of two villains for Phase 4. I either want Doom or I want Kang.
Yeah, that's
spoiler alert.
Yeah,
I think you're gonna get both.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
Doom's going to show up, but Kang is going to be the big villain for the arc.
I'll tell you, there's a Doctor Doom comic I'm reading right now where Kang and Doctor Doom, like Kang is like helping Doctor Doom, and it is a messed up story arc. So yeah, I think seeding is great. Like finding a symbol or a note or like what is this group? Like what are they doing? What do they want?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're going back to emotional investment.
Yeah.
In this case, the initial emotional investment you're creating is curiosity.
Yeah. Like, who is this guy that apparently he's got his fingers in all these pies?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it's the moment where in The Usual Suspects, where they mention Kaiser Soze's name.
Yeah.
Right. Like just, and then he comes in. Who's Kaiser Soze? Oh, damn it. Right. Like,
yes.
Yeah, so I agree. Like the seeding is such a great technique. Again, you know, you don't have to show your villain right away, and you don't have to race through their arc. You can, you know, I could be doing a 4-game initial arc of a campaign where I'm like, well, I'm testing it out with these four sessions. I don't want a major villain in my 4 sessions, right? Because I don't even know if I'm keeping this game around.
Yeah.
But I can leave word about Baron Von Badass in one of those sessions. And if this game takes off after session 4, well, now I'll just start, like, now I'm gonna ramp up Baron Von Badass. Cool. Excellent piece of advice, Bob. All right. That is our look at villains. We hope that the next time you make up a villain for your game, you're going to put some of these pieces of advice into action. And we're going to check in one last time with the chat room, and then we're bouncing over to the conversation corner.
Yeah. We're a little caught up in the MCU talk at the moment, so.
Did we trigger them into a big MCU thing? Or?
A little bit of a triggering.
Yeah, it gets everybody.
That's the way it works.
That's fine. If they're all chatted up, then we can just bounce over to the conversation.
Yeah, let me find the thing here. Boom, 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 boom. And there we are, the conversation corner.
Alrighty.
Conversation corner.
Conversation corner.
Hey,
Bob, tell me, man, what else you been going on
so I'm
in
going
your
to
life
start
this
with
week?
something that I added during the course of the show.
Yes.
There's a rumor going around, lots of rumors, of course, but there is a casting rumor that I'm hoping is going to pan out for Dr. Doom in the MCU. One, the powers that be are looking for someone with the acting chops and the gravitas to pull off a character with the weight of a Dr. Doom.
Yes.
This character needs, like a Sir Patrick Stewart for Xavier, those kind of, like,
I'm with you so far.
Yeah.
Somebody
Preach
like
on.
that. And one of the names that came up is someone who wants to get into the MCU. And that's let me get the name right because it's pronounced a certain way. Giancarlo Esposito, who plays
wow
in The Mandalorian.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Plays who?
Moff Gideon
in The Mandalorian. He's the guy with the dark
saber.
Yeah. The guy who at the end arrives on the in the TIE fighter?
Yeah.
Yes. He was also Gus. He was also Gus Fring in Breaking Bad. If you watch Breaking Bad.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm in.
Yeah.
I like. All right. Yeah.
Of course, my microphone's doing the thing again, so a lot of people didn't hear. But yeah, so they're courting the possibility of Giancarlo Esposito, Dr. Doom. And
I would be 100%. I would be 100% in favor of that. Yeah.
I'm all about that. So.
I support this. This is. Oh. Okay, that sounds like somebody's boom mic or something is banging on something.
No, there is thunder outside my house. It's been
there's thunder outside my house too. So
hence why
the end of the show.
Yes, hence why my daughter ran for the basement where I am currently. Currently, although it must have passed over my place.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's a thing. I did some more cleaning and organizing. A shelf thing that I ordered arrived finally yesterday, and I did some cleaning in my room and organized some stuff. And because organization is good. Phil knows.
Yeah.
I have been watching hockey in August.
I watched a little. I watched that lackluster Vancouver Minnesota game.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of a couple of games over the last 2 days, mostly because, it's hockey, and I didn't realize how much I missed it until it was on, and I went, ooh, and I started watching, and I went, ooh, hockey. And there's no crowd. There's literally just the players on the ice, the officials, the teams on the bench, and the team personnel that's on the bench. I don't even see the normal, there's somebody behind the goal, usually, that's the goal judge. I don't know how they're managing that, but all the lower bowl of the arenas are all covered up.
Ange is asking if hockey is doing better than baseball, and they are. Hockey and basketball took a very different approach than baseball did.
Yeah.
Hockey and basketball took the bubble approach, which was they're running a finite number of games with a finite set of teams, I think in 2 cities, if I remember correctly. And there are pretty strict rules. Like once you're in the bubble, you have to stay in the bubble. You're constantly tested.
Yeah.
And there are penalties if you leave the bubble. You can't get back in, that kind of thing.
Like the guy that went to the strip club to get the wings.
Right. And is now sitting out.
Yeah. So that's, it's a thing. It's weird.
And they're doing it. And the NBA has been negative COVID cases all the way through. The problem with baseball is baseball did not do a bubble. Baseball made each team come up with their own rules for quarantining. So, of course, right off the bat, Florida just lost it.
Yeah.
Then I think who else? Philadelphia is currently shut down. And I want to say the Cardinals the Cardinals had a outbreak of infections a couple of days ago, which goes to show you that, right, the bubble is working when you are willing to isolate yourself, throw money at it, whatever. But if you're just letting each team kind of come up with their own rules, like,
not a good way to handle it.
This is why it's fallen apart.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's the thing I'm doing. We
Nice.
played another session of Streets of Avalon this past Friday.
Yeah.
It was our first session in like 2 months almost for various reasons. We finally got back to it. We added a new player. We lost John Arcadian. He had to bow out, but we brought in Eileen Barnes.
Oh,
Nice.
I love Eileen. I've gamed with Eileen
Yep.
before. She's great.
And her character is a blast. And there just happens to be some good friction between her character and Brandon's character. So
That's
that was
awesome.
fun. And we had a lot of fun because there was a bug that was wearing my character's face, and more than one bug. Long story short, I took a potion of healing from the potion maker, but their product is not always good. And when I rolled the dice for how good the product was, I failed. So I barfed up this bug after I drank the potion. And then the bug went off and multiplied. And because they came from me, they were all wearing my face and they were doing things and I was getting blamed for them. And we ended up having to
I
kill
love
them
it.
and clear my name. And hilarity ensued. It was pretty funny.
That's hilarious. That sounds also very Streets of Avalon.
Yeah.
Yes,
very.
it does.
And I finally got to shoot my gun because, firearms in Avalon.
Yeah.
Made a hell of a lot of noise. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up is I'm super excited because Star Trek Lower Decks drops on Thursday, which is 2 days from now in the current timeline. In future podcast timeline, if you're listening to this in the future, it will be the previous Thursday. Lower Decks, again, is the animated, more humorous Star Trek show. And that is going to run from this Thursday for I forget how many weeks. And then as soon as that last episode is done, the following week after that, Discovery Season 3 starts. So there's 23 weeks of new Trek coming, and I'm super excited about it. Yay.
That's awesome.
Good times.
How about you, Jer?
All right. Well, first of all, like I said, I watched the aforementioned Jojo Rabbit, which I thought was a lot of fun. Kept my interest. Just some excellent Trek this week. Between the appearance of Kahless and Worf's dealing with him to the double Riker storyline that started. Just really a lot of fun. Finally got a chance to sit down and watch Hamilton. I like the sets and the story and the characters, the casting. And for the first time in like a decade, I rewatched The Talented Mr. Ripley, and I'd forgotten what a good movie that was. I saw it originally, and at the time I wasn't a big Matt Damon fan at all. I kind of barely knew who Jude Law was, Kate Blanchett, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and what's her name? The one who played
Gwyneth
Paltrow. Yeah, we're all actors that I kind of knew about but hadn't seen anything in. To watch them again as they're, as younger actors, really just acting the crap out of a really good plot. Ripley's an excellent example of a villain who, for the most part, doesn't see himself as a villain. He actually has the quote that nobody sees themselves as the bad guy.
Yep.
Right.
But it's a brilliant movie about a person who is surrounded by other horrible people, and some horrible people, and convinces himself ways to think his way out of the bad guy, out of dealing with them. And it's just a good episode, a good series. They're going to make a TV series about it on, I think it's either Showtime or Netflix or Hulu or one of them. But it was a good series, and it's got the person who played Moriarty in the BBC Sherlock series was there. It's going to be playing Ripley. And lastly, I'm almost caught up on Elementary. I'm in the last season, and I guess that show is still on the air. So I'm like 6 episodes away. So I'm about ready to look for something else serious to start binge watching. I've got things like Avatar and She-Ra and things like that to watch, but I want something kind of lighthearted and goofy. But Elementary has been my serious watch for the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to start looking for something. How about you, Bob? Or how about you, Phil?
Yeah. So I've been watching Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
as I have finished up Deep Space Nine, so I'm watching Voyager now. It's fun to identify the particular types of episodes. So like I've seen the first, so I'm in season 1, right? So I've encountered the first Prime Directive episode, where there's a quandary about the Prime Directive, although it's got a really nice spin on it. It's got a really cool ending. At first I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to tie into other things, when we do the Voyager watch list one day, but after watching the episode, I'm like, nope, this thing's in the watch list. It's great. I just saw I'm in the middle of the first holodeck mishap.
You have to have one.
What is a modern Star Trek show without a holodeck mishap? So that is underway. So anyway, I'm watching Voyager. I'm having fun watching it. And I'm learning to enjoy these characters, right? I'm learning to get to know them and to like them. I kind of really like, it's really interesting because I had such, negative feelings because I was so angry about Voyager not being, Deep Space Nine Part 2, that it really kind of messed up my original watching of the show. And I really like that Janeway is both, a pretty tough captain, actually. Like she's actually pretty hard-nosed and tough, but she's also super sciencey. Like I'm pretty sure her background is in the sciences, and she is like right in there in engineering with B'Elanna, coming up with solutions to issues and things like that, which I dig. I like that. I like that she's like Picard was the archaeologist captain. Sisko was actually an engineer because Sisko was actually partially responsible for the Defiant project. And then Janeway seems to also be very science oriented. And I like all these captains, right? Don't get me wrong. I don't dislike any of them, but I like that Janeway's a lot cooler than I remembered. I know there's an episode coming up in season 1 that I'm going to object to because it's the one that broke me the first time, and I'm going to watch it fresh and new. Because and you know it too, Bob, because we both ranted about it when it came out. But I'm going to watch it again and just see if I see it differently rather than just being angry. Because
is this one of the ones that makes me hate Janeway?
It's the one you think makes you hate Janeway, but I'm going to tell you that one needs to open up their mind and come back fresh. But I'm with you. I need to go back and rewatch it. Anyway, I'll skip from Voyager. I've been again reading a lot of Numenera. We talked about that. Playing a little Minecraft. I got to do some just fun building. Like I know you guys love capsules and prefab and stuff, but I actually miss building stuff. So I built the tech center, which is a fairly large building, and I built it with like a sub basement so I could run conduits and like do all the like really clean wiring and stuff. And I'm having like a lot of fun building it out. So I forgot, like for me, like tunneling into the side of a mountain and making a base out of it is one of my jams, like reshaping a cave system into a base and stuff like that.
It's one of mine too.
Yeah,
that's what I've been working on for the last week.
Yeah, prefab's nice and all of those, like it's fun, but like actually building something is something that I forgot how much I enjoy in the game. So anyway, I've been having a little fun going back and doing that. Played some Call of Cthulhu earlier this week, where we took care of the Snake Men and narrowly escaped them making a volcano out of their temporary base, because I don't think we found their real base. What else? I got my copy of Fiasco today sitting up on my desk. That's a game you play with people at a table in front of you. So it's wonderful. It looks beautiful. The components are magnificent. And then I'm going to have to go put it on a shelf. Right? Like I'm going to have to just go pick it up and put it on a shelf because I can't play it with anyone. I can play Roll20 version, which is great. And they've done a wonderful job making digital assets for it. So we can totally play Fiasco. I just can't play the box of Fiasco for right now. So just going to leave that on the shelf for a healthier time. And lastly, I watched an old movie this weekend as we've been, watching movies with the kids. We watched Sneakers, which I am very fond of. I think, Bob, you're a big fan of that movie as well,
Sneakers
right?
was awesome.
I love that movie. There's
Yeah.
There is a brief story about that movie, and that is that my father doesn't have a memory for watching TV shows. He can watch a TV show and go back and watch it again 2 weeks later and not remember the plot at all. And when Sneakers came out, he went to go see it at the theater because he was out of town working and there was nothing else to do. And 2 weeks later, my mom and her sister wanted to go see a movie. So they went to go see it and they brought him along. And he's sitting in the movie going, I think I've seen this. Like, no, you haven't seen this. And he was a good half hour into the movie before he realized he saw it. And then a year later, it was at the cheap cinema and they went to go see it again and he forgot he'd seen it. And after that, like every couple of years, somebody buys him a copy of it on DVD just to kind of poke fun at him. And it's one of his favorite movies, though. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
I would love if there was a drug that you could take that would make you forget you saw a movie, just so I could watch it again the first time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I would love that ability. Like, I would love to see a movie and be like, oh, I love this movie so much. And then like watch it again and be like, oh my God, this movie, right? Like, I mean, it's one thing to enjoy a movie you've seen before, but like the first time, like you've seen like a really good movie, like the first time I saw Usual Suspects, and it all came together, and I was like, oh, right, like that moment is just like you can't have that moment again.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's
just like the first fight scene in John Wick. Like when you get to the fight scene in the house, you're just like, you're just speechless. You're like, this is art. Like this murder sequence is just art.
You remember going to see Swordfish?
Yes.
The opening sequence of Swordfish.
Yes.
Was like,
oh my
when I
God.
threw my napkin up in the air and was like, we're done.
Shoulder, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't think this movie's going to get better than this scene.
The other advantage he has with this is because he's a huge football fan, is he has the NFL Network, and
that's great.
So he can watch a game that he saw last year, and as long as he doesn't look it up, he doesn't remember who won. He doesn't remember there are very few. He's got a great memory for other things. It's just things like entertainment just don't stick in his brain.
No, it's not the worst thing I've heard.
Nope. And so he has a good time watching. So that's but Sneakers is a great. So I've seen Sneakers multiple times because it's one of his favorite movies, and it's a really good movie.
Yeah,
with a stellar cast. I mean,
that cast is great.
Yeah, that cast is amazing.
Ange brings up a good point, right?
Yeah.
I love The Usual Suspects as well, and yes, it's got problems all over because of who's in it, and I will also say this: it has one of the sickest soundtracks. The Usual Suspects soundtrack is like some of the creepiest, spookiest music. If you want to play something suspenseful and you need a soundtrack, that soundtrack's amazing for building suspense.
Definitely.
All right, should we get on to the?
Indeed.
All right, Patreon shout-outs. Thank you for being our patrons: Jen Pixelscapes Gagny, Jim Fitzpatrick, Joseph Peralta, Mike Amer, Brett, Ninjabi, The Rainmaker,
Tony,
Richard Ruane, Rory McLeod, and Savannah Sizer.
Hey, Savannah, who's in the chat room tonight?
Yes,
hey,
thank
Savannah.
you all. And thank you to everyone for listening tonight.
If you are free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, you're welcome. Come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with the other awesome, and I do mean awesome, listeners in the chat room for life, and ask us the occasional question.
And if you cannot make the live show, please check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcasts, and take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Bone Stone Obsidian, the FM Gamers, Pandas Talking Games, the Gnomecast, Zhanghu Hustle, She's a Super Geek, and Bonus Experience. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
after you have introduced your villain, but before you let your players bust into its lair and crush them, leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly via email at mmp@misdirectedmark.com. Check us out on Twitter. The show in the network is @misdirectedmark. He's Robert M. Everson. He's GM Gerrymander. And I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP, Down with D&D and Panda Stocking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. She's a Super Geek is at patreon.com/SassGeek. Zhanghu Hustle is at patreon.com/Zhanghu Hustle. And Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of MMP, Down with D&D and Panda Stocking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Panda Stocking Games bonus outtakes, and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production. The media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop.
Yow.